the best commentaries from the last video. Subscribe to see more stories.
My name is Alex Monroe, and I never imagined that the day I discovered betrayal would also be the day I began to find out who I really was. I first felt an uneasy sensation, a gentle, nagging discomfort that crept into my everyday routine. I always believed that my marriage to Jasmine was founded on trust and understanding, a bond strong enough to survive any hardship. Yet now, as I write these words, I must face a truth that completely shattered that belief. It was a rainy Tuesday evening when I got home from work. The cool, damp air seemed to match the mood that had weighed on my heart for weeks. I noticed the living room lights were on, and I could hear soft conversation coming from behind the closed door. Jasmine had been busy with her art projects recently, and it wasn't unusual for her to have friends over. I didn't think much of it and quietly walked into the kitchen to make some tea. Still, my gut feeling was sharper than I had admitted. There was a strange hesitancy in the air, a subtle, unexplainable distance that made everything seem unfamiliar. After waiting a few minutes, I mustered my courage and knocked on the living room door. "Jess, can I come in?" I asked, my voice hiding the dread swirling inside me. The door opened just a bit, and instead of the familiar smiling face, I saw a woman I had never met, her eyes avoiding mine as she shared a quick, nervous look with Jasmine. My mind raced as I tried to understand what this meeting meant. The conversation felt awkward, words stumbled like unsure travelers on a path they didn't recognize. It didn't take long to realize that the delicate structure of my trust was falling apart. I remember standing there, my heart pounding as the weight of betrayal sank in. Jasmine's soft, apologetic voice filled the room with confessions I could hardly believe. She admitted to a betrayal, a secret affair born from loneliness and confusion, a mistake that had grown into something much more complicated and painful than I could have ever imagined. Her words, once spoken, echoed inside me like a distant thunderclap, leaving me both numb and furious. In that moment, everything changed. The warm, welcoming home I once loved now felt like a stage set for deception. Every cherished memory, a shared laugh, a quiet evening on the porch, a look of understanding in her eyes, was now seen through a lens of treachery. I retreated to the quiet of my study, shutting out a world that no longer made sense. The silence in that room became a confession booth, with every heartbeat reminding me of what I had lost. I spent the night in disbelief, replaying every conversation and every glance, trying to figure out the signs I had missed. My mind became a battlefield of mixed emotions, sorrow fought with anger, love clashed with resentment, and all the while, a deep sense of betrayal festered. I questioned my own worth, wondering how I could have been so blind to the cracks in our marriage. The trust one had placed in Jasmine now felt like a delicate vase that had been shattered beyond repair. As the days blurred into a series of painful reflections, I began to see that this betrayal was more than just an act of infidelity, it was a mirror showing the silent gaps in our relationship. Jasmine had often felt alone, lost in her creative work while I was busy with my career. We had slowly drifted apart without fully realizing it, our once lively connection fading into a series of routine days and ignored issues. The affair wasn't the start of our problems but rather the tragic end of a long, failing connection. I found myself wandering the empty streets of our city, looking for comfort in the anonymity of strangers and the steady hum of everyday life. During these long walks, I had moments of clarity. I remembered the man I used to be before our love got tangled in promises and expectations, a man full of hope, courage, and a strong desire for life. I decided to take back that identity, even if it meant facing the bitter aftermath of heartbreak. In the quiet of these wanderings, I began to question the true meaning of trust and forgiveness. Could I ever trust again? Would I be able to forgive Jasmine, or was this betrayal a wound too deep to mend? These questions tormented me, echoing in the silent parts of my mind. I turned to old journals and notebooks, scribbling down my thoughts as a way to process the overwhelming emotions. Writing became my safe place, a spot where I could face the ghosts of my past and the uncertain promise of the future. The healing process wasn't simple or without pain. Some days, the sting of betrayal felt as fresh as a new cut, while other days, time provided a gentle relief. I began to understand that healing required both acceptance and resistance, a careful balance between clinging to what was lost and daring to hope for what might be gained. As I slowly rebuilt the pieces of my shattered self, I realized that my story didn't have to end with this betrayal. Instead, it could mark a turning point, a spark for rediscovery and growth. I reached out to old friends, sought help from a therapist, and found comfort in the small joys of everyday life. I learned that even in the midst of heartbreak, there is a chance for renewal, and there is beauty in the scars that remain. Now, I stand at the brink of a new beginning, with the echoes of my past urging me to step into an uncertain future. Jasmine's betrayal has permanently changed the landscape of my heart, but it has also shown me the hidden strength I never knew I had. I am learning to accept the pain, understanding that it is a necessary step toward rediscovery. This journey, marked by sorrow and betrayal, also proves the resilience of the human spirit. Today, I choose to tell my story not as a tale of loss, but as a declaration of personal rebirth. I am Alexander Monroe, a man who has loved deeply, suffered greatly, and still moves forward with careful hope. My heart carries the scars of betrayal, yet within those marks is the story of survival and the promise of a future free from past burdens. As I close this chapter of my life, I invite you to join me on this ongoing journey of healing. I do not claim to have all the answers, but I promise to share every step of my transformation with honesty and reflection. The road ahead is uncertain, yet I am determined to create a path that respects both my pain and my potential for growth. For now, this is not the end of my story, it is simply the start of a new, unexplored chapter in the saga of my life. In the days after that fateful night, I found myself caught between despair and determination. My once perfectly organized life had been thrown into chaos, filling me with unexpected anger, sadness, and a strong desire to understand myself better. The echoes of betrayal rang in every corner of my mind, yet amid the turmoil, a quiet inner voice urged me to look deep within my soul for meaning. The first step on this hard journey was to face the raw feelings I had kept hidden for so long. I chose to open up to Daniel, an old friend who had seen every side of my life, both the bright and the dark moments. Over steaming cups of coffee in a warm, dim cafe, I shared the events that had unraveled my marriage. Daniel listened closely, his eyes full of both care and concern. He reminded me that every deep wound carries a lesson. His words struck a chord in me, revealing that the pain I was feeling was not a dead end but an invitation to rediscover who I really was. Encouraged by Daniel's steady support, I looked for professional help. I booked an appointment with Dr. Olivia Hartman, a therapist known for guiding people through the maze of heartbreak. Our sessions were unlike anything I had ever experienced. Dr. Hart's method was both kind and sharp. She urged me to look past the betrayal and explore the inner landscapes I had long ignored. Through our talks, I began to untangle the mix of emotions, grief blended with anger, disappointment mixed with a faint hope. Each session brought me closer to the idea that my identity was not just defined by my relationship with Jasmine, but by the collection of experiences, strengths, and vulnerabilities that made me who I am. As weeks turned into months, I set out on a series of solo adventures. I traveled to a quiet cabin beside a sparkling lake, far away from the familiar city life. There, surrounded by nature, I allowed myself to face the silence. The early mornings, colored in soft lavender and gold, became moments of deep thought. I would walk along the misty shoreline, feeling the cool water kiss my feet, with each ripple reminding me of the unrest inside me. In that solitude, I realized that being alone was not an enemy, but a friend on my path to healing. During one of these thoughtful walks, I met Simon, a local writer known for his wise take on life and loss. Simon had his own scars, and his wisdom came from years of wrestling with life's surprises. He shared stories of his struggles with betrayal and regret, reminding me that the human heart has a strong ability to heal. His words, spoken over a small campfire under a starry sky, planted a spark of hope in me. I understood then that each scar was a sign of survival, a mark of battles fought and lessons learned. Back in the city, I began to reconnect with the hobbies that once lit up my spirit. I picked up my old camera and started capturing small moments of beauty, a quiet smile shared by an elderly couple on a park bench, the bright colors of street art in unexpected spots, the gentle play of light and shadow on old cobblestone streets. Photography became my silent way of speaking, letting me express emotions too hard for words. Every click of the shutter captured not just the world around me, but also the subtle changes happening inside me, a slow shift from despair to strength. Along with these creative activities, I dived into books and ideas about life. I read about the nature of human connections, the balance between being open and being strong, and how forgiveness can change a person. Through the words of philosophers and poets, I found comfort in a deeper sense of the shared nature of suffering and hope. Each page felt like a bridge connecting my inner world with the shared experiences of others. It reminded me that even though the pain felt very personal, it was also part of a larger, shared journey, a story woven into the fabric of life. Still, the road was not always smooth. There were days when the sharp sting of betrayal was almost too much to bear, when the memory of Jasmine's smile or the sound of her laugh would overwhelm me and leave me frozen. On those days, I let myself feel the pain without judging it, understanding that healing is a journey, not a destination. I learned to welcome my tears as a natural part of change, each one a sign of both sorrow and a slow letting go of the past. During this time of self-reflection and care, I began to see the delicate dance between vulnerability and strength. I discovered that the pain of betrayal, as harsh as it was, had peeled away my pretenses and revealed my true self underneath. This exposed self was not weak, it was real, capable of deep love, deep pain, and ultimately, growth. Accepting this truth, I started to rebuild my life with a fresh focus on being genuine. I deepened my ties with those who had remained loyal and opened up to new friendships that celebrated honest feelings. By the time I returned to my everyday routine, I had made great strides in reclaiming who I was. My interactions, once darkened by bitterness, began to show warmth and openness again. I learned to see beauty in imperfection, both in myself and in others. I still carried the scars of betrayal, but I no longer saw them as signs of defeat. Instead, they became symbols of survival, proof of the battles I had fought and the strength I had gained. Looking back now, I see that every ending, no matter how painful, holds the promise of a fresh start. The betrayal that once threatened to break my world had, in an unexpected way, awakened parts of me that had been hidden. It forced me to face the truth about who I was and who I wanted to be, a man who is not afraid to feel deeply, to love with passion, and to rebuild from the ruins of broken trust. As I sit here tonight, writing these thoughts in my journal, I feel a cautious hope. The road to healing is long and winding, but each step is a reminder of life's enduring strength. I am learning that forgiving others, and myself, is not a sign of weakness but a powerful act of freeing oneself. It is a choice to rise above the betrayal and to embrace a future that is defined not by old wounds, but by the promise of growth and new beginnings. In this second chapter of my life, I have come to value the inner journey as much as the destination. Rediscovering who I am has been hard, yet it has also been deeply rewarding. With every new day, I remind myself that the scars I bear are not marks of shame, but stories of survival and proof of the power of resilience. The journey goes on, and I am determined to travel it with both care and courage, always remembering the lessons I have learned along the way. In the weeks after my time alone in reflection, life started to throw new and surprising challenges my way. The emotional wounds left by Jasmine's betrayal still hurt, but I knew it was time to face not only the memories but also the lingering questions that had haunted me for so long. My period of self-examination had uncovered deep layers of pain and strength, and now I found myself at a turning point, forced to interact with Jasmine and maybe even find some sense of closure. The shift happened on a cool autumn afternoon when I got a text from an unknown number. The message was short, its tone neutral yet filled with unspoken regret. "Alex, can we talk?" Jasmine. In that single line, my past collided with my present. I hesitated before replying, unsure whether I should reopen old wounds or keep the boundaries I had worked so hard to build. After a restless night, I decided that some talks, no matter how painful, must be faced directly so they don't turn into endless echoes of regret. I agreed to meet at a quiet park filled with memories of happier times, a place that was both ironic and moving for what was to come. The park was like a mosaic of amber leaves and soft sunlight streaming through the branches, a sharp contrast to the storm of feelings inside me. I arrived early and took a slow walk along the winding paths, each step heavy with both hope and nervousness. It was there, among the rustling leaves and the distant laughter of children, that I realized just how closely love and loss are connected in life. When Jasmine finally appeared, she felt both familiar and oddly different. She looked older, her eyes filled with regret, and as she came closer, her movements were cautious and distant. We exchanged a brief nod, a silent way of acknowledging the shared history that linked us. We sat down on an old wooden bench, and I struggled to find the words that could bridge the gap of years and broken promises. After what seemed like an endless moment of silence, Jasmine finally spoke. "Alex, I'm sorry," she began, her voice quivering slightly. It was a simple apology, yet it carried the weight of countless sleepless nights and deep remorse. "I never meant to hurt you so badly. I was lost, and I made choices that I regret every day now." Her eyes searched mine, silently begging for understanding, a feeling I wasn't sure I could give. For a long while, we sat together in silence, our quiet moments speaking louder than words ever could. As our talk continued, I began to see Jasmine not just as the one who broke my trust, but as a person struggling with her own flaws. Our conversation moved from the details of that painful night to broader thoughts about commitment, loneliness, and the fragile nature of human bonds. I asked her why she had taken that path, and she explained that it was a mix of isolation, a desperate need for validation, and a growing disconnect in our marriage. Her raw, unfiltered words, while not justifying her actions, gave me a glimpse into the tangled emotions that led her to make those choices. For me, the discussion was both a moment of truth and a revelation. I shared my own journey over the past months, a path filled with solitary walks, long hours of reflection, and the slow, painful rebuilding of a self I thought was shattered forever. I told her about reconnecting with old friends, the sessions with Dr. Hart that peeled away my despair, and the unexpected beauty I found in everyday moments. With every word, I felt the sting of old wounds mix with the steady beat of new beginnings. Sometimes, our talk grew tense, as if our emotions were locked in a silent battle. There were moments when anger burst out in sharp, sudden flares that threatened to undo the progress I had made. Yet even during those heated moments, I began to see a clear light emerging. I realized that while the pain of betrayal might never vanish completely, it didn't have to rule my entire life. It was just one chapter in a larger story, one that could eventually lead to healing, understanding, or even forgiveness. We talked for a long time about the idea of reconciliation, not to restart a past love, but to acknowledge our shared history and find closure. Jasmine admitted that her regret was deep, but she also accepted that some bridges, once burned, are too fragile to rebuild. I, on the other hand, started to understand that closure isn't a final destination but a gradual process, a slow acceptance of the past and a cautious step toward a future free of its shadows. In that delicate balance between raw feelings and tentative understanding, I recognized that this confrontation was a necessary part of my journey. It wasn't about getting back what was lost or undoing the past, it was about affirming my strength and my readiness to face pain directly. I began to see that every conversation, even one as difficult as this, was a step toward a truer version of myself. The park, with its soft breezes and timeless beauty, quietly witnessed this vulnerable yet strong moment. After our lengthy discussion, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jasmine and I went our separate ways. There was no dramatic goodbye, no promises to start over, just a quiet, mutual understanding that we had both taken an important step on our own paths. As I walked away from the park, the cool evening air filled my lungs, and I felt an unexpected lightness, as if facing my past had freed me, even if just a little. That day, I learned that true closure doesn't come from wiping away memories but from accepting them as a part of who we are. The talk with Jasmine didn't erase the betrayal, nor did it free her of responsibility. Instead, it served as a mirror reflecting the complexity of love and the human ability to make mistakes and grow. I ended up with more questions than answers, yet for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of clarity, a realization that my worth wasn't defined by the pain I endured, but by my capacity to rise above it. When I returned home that evening, I found comfort in the simple routines of my everyday life, a life that, though forever changed, still promised renewal and self-discovery. I picked up my camera again, capturing the dance of light and shadow that had come to symbolize the mix of emotions within me. I began writing once more, not only to record my sorrow but to document my transformation. Every word became a small act of defiance against the darkness that once threatened to overwhelm me. Late at night, I would sit by my window and gaze at the stars, each one a reminder that even in a vast universe, every small light contributes to a bigger picture of hope and possibility. My heart, though still tender from the wounds of betrayal, was gradually healing, mending itself with strands of resilience, self-kindness, and a fresh resolve to embrace life's unpredictable beauty. Chapter 3, with all its challenges and revelations, was not an ending but a crucial turning point in my journey, a moment where my past met the promise of tomorrow. It proved that while betrayal can break the spirit, it can also light the way toward self-discovery and renewal. I left that day with the quiet understanding that my life was mine to rebuild, one honest, delicate, and ultimately beautiful step at a time. As the days lengthened and the winter chill gradually yielded to the promise of spring, I found myself standing on the brink of a new beginning, a place where the wounds of betrayal had mellowed into hard-won lessons, and my heart, though scarred by past hurts, beat with a steadfast hope. The journey of self-discovery had been long and challenging, filled with moments of deep despair, intense self-reflection, and small yet meaningful victories. Now, as I readied myself to welcome the first light of a renewed life, I felt that it was time to focus on the future instead of dwelling on the past. On a bright, quiet morning, I awoke feeling an unexpected lightness. The memories that once felt like chains anchoring me to a sorrowful past had transformed into stepping stones, guiding me toward self-knowledge and inner strength. With the steady rhythm of my heartbeat to lead me, I stepped out into a world that seemed both timeless and full of promise. I began noticing beauty in places that had once brought only painful reminders, the soft rustling of leaves in the park, the warm laughter of strangers in a busy cafe, and even the gentle hum of the city, which now sounded like a lullaby inviting me to savor life's simple wonders. The path to healing had not been straightforward. There were still moments when the sound of Jasmine's name would unexpectedly flood my mind, stirring up a mix of conflicting feelings. But now, armed with the wisdom gained from my inner journey, I recognized these episodes for what they were, echoes of a past that no longer ruled my future. I learned that genuine healing does not mean erasing memories, but rather weaving them into the very fabric of who we are, with each scar telling a tale of survival and growth. During this period, I immersed myself in activities that had once brought me joy and a sense of purpose. My camera became an extension of my inner self, a tool to capture the ever-changing dance of light and shadow, a visual diary not only of the world around me but also of the shifting landscapes within. Every photograph became a silent tribute to life's fleeting nature and the beauty inherent in change. I started holding small exhibitions at local galleries, where my images communicated a language of resilience and hope. Visitors would often stop before a picture, a sunlit street corner, a spontaneous smile of a stranger, or the quiet grandeur of a setting sun, and see in it reflections of their own challenges and victories. Sharing my art also opened doors to unexpected encounters. I met people from all walks of life who each carried their own stories of love, loss, and redemption. One evening at an art show, I found myself in conversation with a woman named Claudia, whose gentle wisdom and quiet determination struck a deep chord within me. Claudia, a community organizer and mental health advocate, had weathered her own storms and emerged with a passion for helping others heal. Our talks, ranging from literature and philosophy to the simple joy of sharing a cup of tea, wove together a tapestry of understanding that went beyond the need for a romantic reunion. In her, I found a kindred spirit, someone who understood that healing is not about erasing the past but about building new, genuine connections grounded in empathy and truth. Moved by Claudia's work, I chose to channel my own experiences into community service. I began volunteering at a local support center focused on helping people overcome personal traumas. Through this work, I discovered a deep sense of purpose. Listening to others, offering them a safe space to share their pain, and opening up about my own story, I realized that vulnerability is not a weakness but a powerful testament to our human capacity for empathy. Every conversation reminded me that the path to healing is as varied as the individuals who walk it, and that sometimes, simply sharing one's burden can be the first step toward true freedom. The relationships in my life, both old and new, began to paint a picture of a redefined existence. The emptiness that had once seemed so overwhelming was now filled with layers of connection, a network of friends, mentors, and community members who celebrated the rich mosaic of human emotion. Through these bonds, I came to understand what it truly meant to love again, not the kind of love marred by expectation or betrayal, but a love free from the shadows of the past, one that saw beauty in imperfections and strength in honest understanding. In quiet moments of reflection, I often revisited the lessons learned from my painful journey. I recalled the long nights spent pouring my heart out onto paper, the solitary walks that led to unexpected meetings, and the soothing silence of nature that allowed my soul to whisper its secrets. Each memory became a chapter in a larger story, not one of defeat, but of transformation, a rebirth into a man who knew that his value was never lessened by the pain he had suffered. I learned that life is made up of many chapters, each with its own challenges and triumphs, and that sometimes the toughest pages are the ones that teach us the most about ourselves. The arrival of spring brought not only a change in season but also a deep inner renewal. I embraced the idea that every ending carries within it the seed of a new beginning. The betrayal, as bitter and painful as it had been, had stripped away false illusions and forced me to confront long-ignored truths. In its wake, it left me with a clarity that was both freeing and humbling. I came to see that forgiveness is not about excusing past actions, but about loosening the grip of anger and sorrow on my heart. It was a deliberate choice to honor my own journey, to allow myself the grace to move forward without being chained to the shadows of yesterday. Now, as I write the final chapter of this narrative, I do so with an open and strong heart. I look forward to a future defined not by the marks of the past but by the promise of growth, connection, and the lasting strength of the human spirit. Every day is like a blank canvas waiting for the brushstrokes of hope, and I am ready to create a new picture, one that celebrates the beauty of life, the power of redemption, and the unyielding courage needed to greet the dawn.